They say every cave has its secrets. I say some caves are secrets themselves, waiting to consume you. Welcome to Whispering Hollow, a place so deep in the Appalachian Mountains. It's a scar on the world. My name is Eliard Quinn, and I came here to stand guard at the gates of a hell I accidentally opened years ago. I lead tours into the dark, living by 3 strange rules just to survive the silence. What's the spookiest place you've ever felt drawn to? Tell me in the comments below. And if you're brave enough to descend with me, subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules and ring that bell. Because in Whispering Hollow, the echoes aren't just sound, they're hunger. The tour begins now. I lost my family, my wife, Anna, and my 6-year-old daughter, Lily, to a single, unforgivable moment of sleep in this very cave. It was a mistake that cost me everything but my life, and that I've often thought was the cruelest part of the bargain. Now, I lead small, exclusive tours into the whispering dark of Whispering Hollow. A job that is less a career and more a penance, a self-imposed sentence to stand guard at the gates of a hell I accidentally opened all those years ago. I accidentally opened all those years ago. The air down here, deep in the belly of the Appalachian Mountains, is ancient, smelling of wet limestone, the deep, loamy scent of forgotten earth, and the faint, unmistakable aroma of grief. My only guides, my only scripture, are the 3 rules etched on an old salt-cured leather scroll I keep in a sealed pouch. Never let anyone photograph the cave ceiling where Cherokee burial symbols are carved. The images will show their own death dates. Always carry a bag of salt from the Dead Sea. Sprinkle it behind the group to prevent cave demons from following. Never let anyone sleep in the cave, even for a moment. Dreams here become reality and trap souls in nightmares. The last group that came through had a skeptic, a young geology student, who thought the rules were just tourist trap theater. The search party only ever found his expensive digital camera, the last photo on its memory card, a perfect high-resolution image of his own skeletal remains lying in the exact spot where they had stood. My name is Eliard Quinn. I used to be Dr. Quinn, an archaeologist whose name was respected in academic circles. Now, I am just Eli, the grim-faced guide with the hollow eyes. Today's tour group was a small, typical collection of souls seeking a manufactured thrill. There were 5 of them. Abby Thorne, a pediatric nurse in her 30s, her face etched with a sadness so profound it seemed to have weight and substance. Max Dalton, a cocky film student in his early 20s, festooned with GoPros and an air of unearned confidence. Here, to capture viral-worthy paranormal evidence. Ricky Vance, a gruff, quiet local electrician in his 50s who'd won the tickets in a town raffle and looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. And then there was Casey Harlow. She stood out, bright, enthusiastic, with wide, curious eyes, and a notebook already filled with questions. She introduced herself as a spiritualist blogger, a sensitive drawn to the cave's powerful energy. She claimed to have read all the local legends, but her questions were too specific, too knowledgeable. She didn't feel like a tourist. She felt like she was coming home. We stood at the cave mouth, a jagged, toothless maw in the side of the mountain. The air inside was already degrees colder, a damp chill that promised a deeper, more permanent cold below. I went through my pre-tour speech, my voice a flat monotone I'd recited 1,000 times. Welcome to Whispering Hollow. This is not a state park. There are no handrails, no paved paths, and no emergency services. The rules I am about to state are not for your entertainment. They are for your survival. You will follow them without deviation. If you cannot, you will leave now. I laid out the 3 rules, my gaze sweeping over each of them, lingering on Max and his cameras. He scoffed, a small, dismissive sound. Casey, however, listened with a rapt, almost reverent attention, nodding as if I were confirming a sacred text she already knew by heart. No one left. They never do. The promise of the forbidden is too strong. I led them in, taking my position at the rear of the line as we descended into the gloom. The world outside, the sounds of birds and wind, vanished, replaced by the dripping of water and the soft scuff of our boots on the stone floor. The silence wasn't empty. It was full, a listening, waiting presence. When the last of the natural light was gone, I reached into the oilskin pouch in my belt. My fingers closed around the coarse, heavy crystals of dead sea salt. Discreetly, making sure no one was looking, I let a small handful fall to the cave floor behind us. The salt didn't just land. I saw it, for a fraction of a second in the beam of my headlamp, shimmer with a faint, blue-white light, and heard a soft, sizzling hiss like water hitting a hot skillet. As it touched the damp stone, it was reacting to something unseen, something that was already following us. Casey, a few feet ahead, half turned at the sound, a flicker of what looked like annoyance crossing her face before she quickly masked it with a bright, curious smile. We ventured deeper, following a path I knew as well as the lines on my own scarred hands. The cave system opened into a series of vast, breathtaking chambers, their walls adorned with colossal stalactites and stalagmites that looked like the teeth and bones of some slumbering stone leviathan. I kept my patter going, a dry recitation of geological facts and carefully sanitized history, all the while sprinkling the salt at regular intervals, a secret, desperate ritual. The air grew colder, heavier, and the whispering began. It was faint at first, easily dismissed as the wind moving through the narrow passages or the echo of dripping water. But it was more than that. It was a sibilant, layered sound, like hundreds of voices all whispering at once, just on the edge of comprehension. I saw Abby, the nurse, flinch, her head tilting as if trying to catch a specific word. I saw Ricky, the electrician, his face grim, his eyes darting into the shadows. Only Max seemed oblivious, his focus entirely on capturing cinematic B-roll of the glistening rock formations. Casey, I noticed, seemed to be listening intently, a small secret smile playing on her lips. Finally, we reached the heart of the cave, the great antechamber. It was a massive domed cavern, and its ceiling was a breathtaking, terrifying work of art. Carved into the smooth, dark stone hundreds of feet above were a series of intricate swirling symbols, the ancient burial glyphs of the Tsalagi, Cherokee tribe that had used this cave as a sacred tomb. "Lights down, please," I commanded, my voice sharp. "Point your headlamps at the floor. The carvings are delicate and can be damaged by prolonged, direct light." It was a lie, of course. The stone was harder than granite. The truth was far more dangerous. I illuminated the chamber with my own powerful, wide-beam lantern, keeping its focus low, letting the ambient light play across the distant ceiling, enough to see the shapes but not to truly resolve them. I spoke of the history, of the tribe that had considered this a place where the veil between worlds was thin. As I spoke, I saw Max, off to the side, slowly, deliberately, raise his high-end mirrorless camera. He was trying to be subtle, holding it low, angling it up. The flash was off, but the lens was wide, designed for low-light photography. He was breaking the first, most important rule. "Max, camera down. Now," I said, my voice cutting through the cavern like a whip. He jumped, startled, but not before the soft, almost inaudible click of the shutter echoed in the vast space. He lowered the camera, a defiant smirk on his face. "No flash, no harm done, man. You have no idea what you've done," I whispered, a cold dread washing over me. The whispering in the cavern seemed to swell, taking on a mocking, triumphant tone. We took a mandated water break in a smaller, safer side chamber a few minutes later. I watched Max as he fiddled with his camera, his initial defiance giving way to frustration. "Weird," he muttered, The camera totally glitched out. The last shot is just a corrupted file. He tapped and swiped at the screen, trying to reboot the device. The group was tense now, the mood broken. Finally, the camera screen flickered back to life, displaying the photo gallery. He scrolled to the last image. He stared at it, and all the color drained from his face. His cocky smirk vanished, replaced by a mask of pure, abject terror. His hands began to tremble so violently he almost dropped the expensive camera. "What is it?" Casey asked, moving to his side, her voice a perfect symphony of feigned concern. Max couldn't speak. He just shook his head, frantically trying to hit the delete button. But the image wouldn't erase. A file error message flashed on the screen. Casey looked over his shoulder, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of triumph in her eyes, before she masked it with a gasp of horror. Pale and trembling, his bravado shattered, Max stumbled over to me and held out the camera. "What is this?" he croaked, his voice a ragged whisper. "What the hell is this?" I took the camera. The image on the screen was crystal clear, perfectly focused, and physically impossible. It was a photo of the great antechamber, the spot where we had just been standing, and lying on the floor, in the exact center of the frame, was a desiccated human corpse. Its flesh withered, its clothes rotted away to reveal bone. It was Max, and on the corpse's wrist was his distinctive, oversized sports watch, its digital display glowing with a single damning piece of information. The date was today's date. The time was less than an hour from now. The photograph shattered the fragile illusion of a tourist adventure. Panic, raw and contagious, began to ripple through the small group. Max was hyperventilating, staring at his own watch as if it were a ticking bomb. Ricky Vance, the electrician, was muttering what sounded like a prayer under his breath, his eyes wide. Abby, the nurse, just looked, lost, her own deep grief now magnified by a new, immediate terror. Casey was the only one who seemed to be holding it together, trying to comfort Max, her performance of a concerned fellow traveler, utterly flawless. "It's a trick," she said soothingly, though her eyes, when they flicked towards me, held a glint of challenge. A digital manipulation. Someone must have hacked his camera. Right, Eli? I ignored her, my mind racing. The prophecy had been set in motion. The cave, or the entity within it, now had a claim on Max. The rules weren't just guidelines. They were the terms of a fragile, ancient truce, and Max had just spat on the treaty. "Everyone with me, we're moving," I commanded, my voice harsher than I intended. "Stay close. Do not stop. Do not look back." My only goal now was to get them out, to retrace our steps, hoping the salt line I'd laid was enough to shield us on the retreat. But the cave had woken up. The whispering was no longer a vague, sibilant chorus. It was clearer now, more personal. It was the sound of imitation. I heard what sounded like my own voice, faint and distant, calling out Anna's name. I saw Abby stumble, her head snapping to the side. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her eyes wide. It sounded like my Sarah, her daughter. The entity was tasting their memories, finding their deepest wounds. We reached a small, cramped section of the cave, a natural bottleneck where we had to squeeze through one at a time. It was the only way forward, the only way out. I sent them through first, taking up the rear. It was a tense, claustrophobic process. On the other side, I insisted on a brief 30-second rest to check headlamps and gear before the final push. "Everyone stay standing. Do not sit down. Do not lean against the walls," I ordered. But Abby, her face a mask of exhaustion, her spirit worn thin by the constant psychological assault, stumbled. She leaned heavily against a smooth, damp rock wall, and for no more than 10 seconds, her eyes fluttered closed. Her body sagged. "Abby," I snapped. Her eyes flew open with a choked, terrified gasp. I saw her," she stammered, her voice trembling. "My Sarah." She was right here. She was holding a little white flower. She said if I just went to sleep, just for a little while, we could go home together. Rule #3 violated. The change in her was immediate and terrifying. Her eyes, which had been filled with a sharp, immediate terror, now seemed clouded. A moment later, she turned to Max, who was still staring catatonically at his watch. "Is that a new camera?" Abby asked, her voice eerily conversational. You should be careful with the light down here. The carvings are delicate," she was repeating, word for word, a conversation we had nearly 2 hours ago at the cave mouth. Her short-term memory of the event had been scooped out, replaced by an echo from the past. The cave, the entity Mọehi, was beginning to eat her experiences, to unravel her from the inside out. Ricky Vance, the gruff local, grabbed my arm, his knuckles white. His face was pale, beaded with sweat. "My grandfather told me about this," he whispered, his voice shaking. He was full-blood Cherokee. "He called this place Sunun's Die, the Hungry Dark. He said the salt, it wasn't just to keep things from following you out. It was to keep your memories from following you in. To keep the dark from getting a taste of you." His eyes darted towards Abby, who was now humming a tune that sounded vaguely familiar, her eyes vacant. "It's got a taste of her now, Eli. It's inside her head." The group's cohesion disintegrated. We were no longer a tour group. We were 5 terrified individuals trapped in a predator's labyrinth. Max was a ghost, stumbling along, muttering about the time, his eyes fixed on his watch. Abby was lost in a fog of recycled memories and phantom conversations. A walking echo. Ricky stuck close to me, his pragmatism now fused with a deep ancestral terror. And Casey. Casey watched it all with a bright, clinical interest, her mask of empathy starting to slip. I knew this wasn't a random haunting anymore, and Casey was at the center of it. She was the only one unaffected, the only one who seemed to be thriving in the oppressive, whispering dark. She was the anomaly. We reached a deep underground river, its water black and impossibly still. It was the last major landmark before the long, final ascent to the surface. We had to cross it on a narrow, natural rock bridge. I insisted on going last, sprinkling a heavy line of salt at the entrance to the bridge. As Casey stepped onto the bridge, I grabbed her arm. "This ends now," I said, my voice low and hard. "Who are you?" She stopped. The bright, curious blogger persona melted away like snow in a fire. Her eyes, when she turned to look at me, were suddenly ancient, cold, and filled with an arrogant amusement. The smile she gave me was all predator. "You really are clever, Eliard," she said, her voice dropping, losing its youthful inflection. "I can see why he wants you. You have a resilience the others lack." "Who is he?" I demanded, my grip tightening on her arm. The salt line behind us sizzled audibly. "The spirit of this place, the hungry dark, the god my ancestors were smart enough to bargain with," she said with a shrug. "My family has been tending this place for centuries, Eliard. We are its keepers, and in return we are granted longevity. Longevity, a life lived outside of time in the dream." She looked at me, her eyes glinting. "This cave is my birthright, and these souls," she gestured dismissively, the terrified remnants of our group, "they are the final tithe, the last offering required to complete the pact." My blood ran cold. My blood ran cold. "The pact. A full merger," she said, her voice filled with a greedy, ecstatic energy. "And Mọehi will finally be able to walk in the sun, in my body, and my consciousness will dream forever as a god, ageless and powerful." She had the wild, zealous eyes of a cultist. She explained how she had orchestrated everything. A subtle, whispered hypnotic suggestion to fuel Max's arrogance and make him take the photo. A carefully timed story about loss to resonate with Abby's grief, making her vulnerable to the dream lure. She was a psychic shepherd, guiding her flock to the slaughter. And then she delivered the final devastating blow. She looked at me, her smile cruel and triumphant. Mọehi has fed on these simple, fearful minds, but it needs an anchor to cross over into the waking world. A powerful consciousness, one already scarred and shaped by the cave's dream logic, one with memories of profound loss tied to this very place. She took a step closer, her voice a triumphant whisper. It doesn't want them, Eliard. It wants you. It has been waiting for you to come home, ever since you left a piece of your soul here with your wife and daughter. Casey's confession hung in the cold, damp air, a poison that solidified the formless dread into a sharp, terrible reality. The whispers in the cave, which had been a constant, insidious chorus, now coalesced, focusing into a single triumphant thought that was not my own, but was projected directly into my mind. Home. Welcome home. Casey's smile widened as she saw me flinch. He's so happy you're here, Eliard. Now let's begin the ceremony. She didn't shout or chant. She simply closed her eyes and hummed a low, resonant note. It was a sound that seemed to vibrate not in the air, but in the stone itself, in the water, in the very marrow of my bones. The cave responded instantly. The illusion of a simple natural cavern shattered. The faint ambient light from our headlamps seemed to warp and bend, casting shadows that writhed and stretched, detaching from the walls to become grasping, three-dimensional things. The still black water of the underground river began to ripple, not from a current, but as if something immense were moving just beneath its surface. What's happening? Max shrieked, his voice cracking with pure terror as he stared at his watch, the numbers on its face now glowing with a faint, sickly green light. The tithe is due, Casey declared, her voice booming with an unnatural resonance. No longer the blogger, but the high priestess of this subterranean hell. From the dark water, a form began to rise. It was Mọehi, no longer a fleeting shadow in a reflection, but a being of solidified nightmare. It was tall and unnaturally thin, its limbs bending at angles that defied anatomy. It was made of a substance that was not quite shadow, and not quite smoke, a shifting, semi-corporeal darkness. It had no face, only a smooth, featureless void where one should be. A void that seemed to drink the light from our headlamps, and from that void, the whispering emanated, a torrent of stolen memories in a single dominant telepathic command. Hunger, panic erupted. Max, with a final horrified scream, turned and ran, scrambling back across the narrow rock bridge. A tendril of shadow, faster than thought, shot out from Mọehi's form, wrapping around his ankle. He was yanked from his feet, his camera flying from his grasp and clattering to the stone floor. He was dragged, screaming and clawing at the rock, into the black, churning water. There was a brief, violent struggle, a final gurgling cry, and then silence. The water where he had vanished was still once more. One tithe paid. Abby, her eyes wide and vacant, took a step forward, not in fear, but in a trance. "Sarah," she whispered, staring at Mọehi's featureless face. "Is that you, baby? You came back for me." The entity was projecting an illusion only she could see, a lure crafted from her deepest grief. She began to walk calmly towards the edge of a deep, dark chasm to our left, a beatific smile on her face. "Abby? No!" I yelled, but she was lost, her mind already consumed by the waking dream. Ricky Vance, the electrician, acted on pure, raw instinct. He tackled her, a clumsy, flying tackle that sent them both sprawling to the ground, just feet from the chasm's edge. "Snap out of it, woman!" he roared, shaking her. Casey tutted, an expression of mild annoyance on her face. Such a messy, primitive response. The offering should go willingly. She raised a hand, and a wave of psychic pressure slammed into Ricky, throwing him back against the cave wall. where he slumped to the ground, dazed and groaning. Mọehi now turned its full attention to Abby, who was dazedly getting to her feet, still murmuring her daughter's name. It glided towards her, a silent, patient predator. This was my chance. While Casey and her god were focused on their next victim, I had to act. I backed away, my mind racing, trying to formulate a plan. I was no match for them in a direct confrontation, but I knew the rules, and I had the salt. I sprinted back the way we had come, into a narrower, more defensible passage. "Ricky, get up! This way!" I yelled. Ricky, shaking his head to clear it, saw Mọehi advancing on Abby, and his face hardened with a grim resolve. He scrambled to his feet and followed me, dragging the still-dazed Abby with him. Casey let us go, a confident, mocking smile on her face. The hunt was more amusing to her than a simple slaughter. We found refuge in a small, dead-end chamber, the one where Max's camera had revealed his fate. There was only one way in or out. I stood at the entrance, the pouch of Dead Sea salt in my hand. "What's the plan, Eli?" Ricky asked, his voice low and steady now, the initial shock replaced by a gritty determination. He had Abby huddled behind him, trying to shield her from the horrors. "The salt is a barrier," I explained, my voice tight. "It creates a space it can't easily cross. It disrupts its connection to this place." I began to pour a thick, unbroken line of the coarse salt across the entrance to the chamber. As the crystals hit the floor, they flared with that same faint blue light, creating a shimmering, ethereal line. We heard it before we saw it. A soft, gliding sound from the main passage. Mọehi appeared at the entrance to our chamber, its featureless face turning towards the salt line. It stopped, seeming to study the barrier. Then the whispers intensified, crawling into my mind. "Your daughter, Eliard. Lily, she is here. She is so cold. She has been waiting for you to come and read her a story. Just go to sleep. You can be with her again." An image flashed in my mind, so real, so vivid, it took my breath away. Lily, in her favorite pajamas, holding her worn copy of Goodnight Moon, her small face filled with a terrible, eternal sadness. The grief was a physical blow, a wave of agony that buckled my knees. "Don't listen, Eliard." Ricky's voice, sharp and grounding, cut through the haze. "It's a trick. It's what it does." I shook my head, clearing the vision, the taste of bitter regret in my mouth. "It's strong. Stronger than I've ever felt it." From behind Mọehi, Casey appeared, her arms crossed, watching with academic interest. "He's just getting started," she said. "He has to break your will before he can claim you. It's part of the bargain. The vessel must be prepared." Mọehi raised a shadowy arm and pointed at the salt line. The shimmering blue light flickered. The entity was testing the barrier, its own psychic energy pushing against the ancient sacred power of the salt. Cracks of darkness began to appear in the luminous line. It wouldn't hold for long. We were trapped. The walls felt like they were closing in. Abby was now weeping softly in the corner, lost in her own private hell. The whispers were getting louder, a torrent of my deepest failures and regrets. Ricky looked at me, his face grim. "My grandfather," he said. "There was one other story," he said, his voice low. "About a warrior who was trapped by the hungry dark. He couldn't fight it, so he fed it. He gave it something it couldn't refuse." "What?" I asked, my eyes fixed on the faltering salt line. "What did he give it?" "Himself," Ricky said softly. "He made a bargain. His life, his story, in exchange for his people's freedom." He looked at the salt pouch in my hand. It was less than a quarter full. Not enough for another barrier. Not enough to get us out. "There's not enough salt to get all of us out of here, Eli. But there might be enough for one." He didn't wait for my response. With a guttural war cry that was pure, defiant rage, Ricky Vance charged out of the chamber, directly at Casey. He was not a warrior, he was an electrician. But he was brave. His charge was a suicidal, desperate act of diversion. Casey, surprised by the sudden physical assault, stumbled back. Ricky grabbed her, a lifetime of frustration and fear fueling his strength, and tackled her, sending them both sprawling to the ground. Mọehi, its attention momentarily diverted from me to the threat against its keeper, turned, a tendril of shadow lashing out at Ricky. "Go!" Ricky roared as the shadow tendril pierced his shoulder. "Get her out! I didn't hesitate." It was the gift of a brave man, and I would not let it be in vain. I grabbed the terrified, weeping Abby, hauled her to her feet, and pushed her ahead of me out of the chamber and into the main passage, away from the fight. Behind me, I heard Ricky give one last defiant scream, followed by Casey's cold, enraged cry, and then a final, terrible, wet, tearing sound. And silence. I didn't look back. I just ran, dragging Abby with me, deeper into the darkness, towards the one place I knew Casey would have to go to complete her ritual. The very heart of the cave. The place where I had lost my own family. The place she called home. The path to the heart of the cave was a journey into my own personal hell. Every dripping stalactite, every echoing footstep a reminder of that last fatal expedition with Anna and Lily. I half-dragged, half-carried the weeping, disoriented Abby, my mind a maelstrom of grief, guilt, and a cold, grim resolve. Ricky's sacrifice had bought us time, but it was a currency that was rapidly losing its value in this subterranean kingdom of nightmares. The whispers followed us, no longer tempting but mocking. A constant chorus of my failures spoken in Casey's triumphant, resonant voice, echoing from the very stones around us. She waited for you, Eliard. Lily waited in the dark, but you were sleeping. You slept while the dark took them. We finally reached it, the final chamber. It was not the largest, but it was the oldest. The walls covered in a tapestry of pictographs telling stories of hunts, births, and deaths. And in the center of the chamber, a place I had avoided for years, was a single, flat-topped altar stone. This was the place where the veil was not just thin. It was shredded, a gaping wound between the waking world and the dream space of Mọehi. Casey was already there. She stood before the altar, her hands raised. She was no longer just a woman. A shimmering, dark energy wreathed her body, her form seeming to flicker, to blur the edges. The power she was drawing from the cave, fueled by the sacrifices of Max and Ricky, was immense. The air was electric, heavy with a pressure that made my lungs burn and my head ache. Abby collapsed at the entrance to the chamber, curling into a fetal position, lost completely to the waking nightmare. "You're too late, Eliard," Casey said, her voice now a layered, echoing chorus of her own voice, and something older, deeper. "The final tithe has been paid. The vessel is prepared. Now all that is required is the anchor. Your consciousness, your story." She turned to face me, and for the first time I could see the true cost of her bargain. Her eyes were no longer human. They were twin pools of shifting shadow, windows into the void of Mọehi itself. "I am offering you a choice, a mercy I did not offer the others. They were merely sustenance. You are a cornerstone." She laid out the ultimatum, her voice calm, rational, the voice of a god explaining the mechanics of a new cosmos. "You can offer your consciousness willingly. Step into the dream. Become Mọehi's eternal prisoner, the anchor that tethers him to this world as I walk free in yours. Your story, your grief for your family, is powerful enough to satisfy him, perhaps for centuries." In return, she made a magnanimous gesture. The nurse, Abby, will be released. Her mind will be wiped clean, and she will be allowed to walk out of this cave back into the sun. A single, merciful blank slate. The alternative was unspoken but clear in the crushing psychic pressure that now filled the chamber. If I refused, Mọehi, in its rage, would simply consume us all. A far more agonizing, chaotic end, and the pact would still be fulfilled. Why? I managed to ask, my voice a hoarse croak. Why all this? Because you mortals are so fragile, the layered voice replied with a sigh of ancient ennui. You live, you love, you break, you die. It's a tedious, fleeting cycle. We offer something more, permanence, to become a story, a dream, a nightmare. That is a form of immortality, isn't it? Mọehi, now a great swirling column of shadow and stolen memories behind her, began to exert its full power on me. It didn't need illusions anymore. It delved directly into my mind, into the sealed-off, festering wound of my past. I was no longer in the cave. I was back in that tent 8 years ago. I could smell the canvas, the night air, the faint, sweet scent of Lily's shampoo. I saw Anna, her face illuminated by the soft glow of a lantern, her eyes full of a tired, gentle love. Just rest for a bit, Eli, she was saying. I'll watch Lily, and I saw myself, a younger, happier, more foolish man. Close my eyes, I felt the pull of sleep, the sweet, heavy relief of exhaustion. And then the dream began. A nightmare of grasping shadows, of a featureless face, of my daughter's faint, terrified coming from a great distance. I saw myself trying to run, my legs trapped in mud, trying to scream, but having no voice. I felt Anna being pulled away, her hands slipping from mine. I was forced to relive the moment of my greatest failure, the moment I chose sleep over vigilance, in an agonizing, repeating, high-fidelity loop. Each cycle was more painful, more real than the last, designed to scour my spirit, to break my will, to make the endless oblivion of the dream space seem like a welcome relief. This is your prison, Eliard, the entity whispered in my mind. It has been waiting for you. Surrender. Give us your story, and it will finally end. I was drowning in my own grief, my consciousness fracturing under the weight of the endless, repeating horror. I could feel my resolve crumbling. The idea of just letting go, of surrendering to the quiet dark, becoming a seductive promise. I was on my knees, the cold stone of the cave floor pressing into my skin, the psychic assault of Mọehi, threatening to shatter the last fragments of my sanity. The loop played again. Anna's smile, Lily's trusting face, the heavy pull of sleep, the scream in the dark. It was a perfect engine of despair, fueled by my own memory. Casey watched, her face a mask of triumphant patience, as my will eroded. But as the memory played for the dozenth, the 100th time, something shifted. Ricky's last words echoed in the back of my mind. He fed it. He gave it something it couldn't refuse. He had fed it himself, his life. But my life was not what Mọehi wanted. It wanted my story, my grief. And in that moment of ultimate despair, a new, cold, and terrible clarity arose. Casey was right. My grief was powerful. It was the most potent, most real thing I had left in the world. She saw it as a vulnerability, a weapon to be used against me. Mọehi saw it as a delicious meal, the final course in a long feast. But what if it wasn't a weapon or a meal? What if it was a cage? You want my story? I thought, not with defiance, but with a sudden, chilling calm, focusing my entire consciousness into a single point of intent. You want my grief? Then have it. Have all of it. Instead of fighting the memory loop, I embraced it. I willingly, consciously, offered it to the psychic predator. But I did not offer it as a victim surrendering to his tormentor. I offered it as a storyteller, giving a final, perfect, and utterly unbreakable gift. I poured every ounce of my being, every shred of my soul, into that single, defining moment of my life. The love I felt for Anna, so fierce it was a physical ache. The boundless, protective adoration I had for Lily. The crushing, absolute weight of my failure. The bottomless, echoing chasm of my loss. I didn't just give Mọehi the events. I gave it the raw, unfiltered human meaning behind them. And Mọehi, in its ancient arrogance and predatory greed, consumed the offering. It was the most potent meal it had ever tasted, and it was pure poison. The entity, a being of parasitic hunger and shadow, had no concept of the complexities of human love, grief, and self-recrimination. It was like a simple organism trying to digest a complex radioactive isotope. The pure, paradoxical power of love and loss, offered not in fear, but with a focused, sacrificial will, was something its ancient consciousness could not process. It could not feed on it. It could only become it. It could only become it. A psychic scream, not of triumph, but of pure, agonized confusion, erupted from the entity. The swirling column of shadow began to destabilize, to fracture. It was no longer a predator hunting a memory. It was trapped inside the memory, forced to endlessly experience a narrative of human love and loss, a story with no escape and no sustenance for a creature like itself. It was trapped in my heart, a ghost in its own machine. The feedback loop to Casey was catastrophic. The power that had been flowing into her, elevating her to godhood, reversed its polarity. The raw, confused agony of the now imprisoned Mọehi poured back into her. She shrieked, a high, thin sound of a circuit being overloaded. The dark energy around her body dissipated, and she collapsed to the ground, her eyes wide and completely, utterly vacant. She was an empty vessel, her consciousness shattered by the psychic backlash, a dream of godhood ending in a silent, waking void. The cave fell silent. The whispers stopped. The oppressive pressure vanished. The air became just air, cold, damp, and ancient. It was over. I stumbled to my feet, a hollowed-out man. The grief, the defining emotional core of my existence for 8 long years, was gone. I had given it away. I could remember the facts of what happened. I had a wife named Anna, a daughter named Lily. We came to this cave, and I lost them. But the feeling, the aching, soul-crushing weight of it, was absent. There was only a quiet intellectual knowledge of a great sadness, like reading a tragic story about a stranger. I helped the still confused, amnesiac Abby to her feet. We were the only two left. I led her out of the cave, back up into the world of sunlight and birdsong, a world that now felt strangely flat and distant. The official story became one of a sudden, unexpected cave-in. 4 dead, including the guide. A tragic accident. No one questioned the 2 survivors, one of whom couldn't remember anything, and the other who had nothing left to say. Casey Harlow was found and quietly institutionalized, a beautiful, empty shell. I left whispering hollow that day and never looked back. I was free of my penance, free of my grief, free of the ghost that had haunted me. But it was the freedom of an empty room. Months later, I am trying to build a new life in a new city. It is a quiet life, a life without flavor. This morning, I was going through an old box of my belongings from my previous life as Dr. Quinn, a life that feels like it belonged to someone else. I found an old photograph, one I hadn't looked at in years. It was of the 3 of us, Anna, Lily, and me, taken on the day we first arrived at the entrance to Whispering Hollow, smiling for the camera before our last expedition. I stared at it, trying to feel something, anything. I felt nothing. It was just a picture of strangers. But as my eyes scanned the details, I noticed something in the background of the photo. On the rock wall of the cave mouth behind us, something I had never ever seen before. It was small, almost invisible, easily mistaken for a trick of the light. I pulled out a magnifying glass. Carved into the rock in the looping, elegant script of a 19th century hand was one of the Cherokee symbols from the ceiling, the one the tribe used to signify a completed journey or a soul set to rest. And beneath it, a date was etched. It was today's date. I lowered the magnifying glass, my hand steady, my heart beating at a slow, even rhythm. I looked up from the photograph, and for the first time since leaving the cave, I felt a faint, cold whisper in the profound silence of my empty apartment. The cave had been fed. The debt had been paid. My story had been given, and my time had just run out.